It now being 11 o'clock, and us all having been assembled here in Aberdeen on such a beautiful un-Aberdeen morning, I didn't possess a pair of sunglasses when I was a student here, but I was wearing them today. And those of you who are in less sunny parts of the world, welcome to you as well to this 322nd statutory meeting of the General Council. Now, can we first look at the minutes of the 321st statutory meeting? What I would like to do is to go through them page by page and check that people are happy with their accuracy. Page 1. Page 2. And page 3. So are the minutes approved? Does anyone dissent from the approval of the minutes? Good, thank you very much. Matters arising from page 1, from page 2. Roger. Yeah, I'm not sure. Oh, I should switch it on. The resolution was transmitted to the court, and I know that they discussed it. Action, I think, is too active a word to describe the response. I haven't had any formal response. We keep, however, the business committee keep, however, in close touch with Morag Beers, who's the Director of Estates and Facilities, on estates matters generally, but Marshall East in particular. And I know that she is very conscious of the important burden which the university carries with Marshall East. But Jenny Mordew, the vice convener, I should have explained that I'm Duncan McNiven, the convener of the business committee. Jenny Mordew, who's the vice convener and who spearheads our action on Marshall East, wants to add something. Jenny.
Thank you. It was just to add that the business committee of the General Council had the pleasure of Morag Beers coming along and speaking about all the estate, and within that, Marshall East. And whereas it's been stated before, the university has no further use for it at the moment, Morag is very much of the opinion that she is there for stewardship of those buildings, and the university will look after them until such time that the town and the gown can get together and sell on or let those buildings. So I was satisfied, I think the business committee was satisfied that due consideration has been taken, and although it's mothballed, everything will be done to keep it safe until such time as it can come back into use in some form or other.
Thanks, Jenny. Is that an adequate response, Roger?
Yes, it is. The only thing that
Thank you. Yes, I think the importance of that is recognised now. Uh, Peter Zellermanroe, is it, wants to add something remotely? Peter. We can't hear you at the moment. Oh. But something is being done to rectify that. We will be with you in a moment, Peter, or you will be with us in a moment.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes, but speak loudly. I'm going deaf.
Right. Well, when I was at university, the university's collection of historical artifacts was held at Marshall College. Is that still the case? And will they be safe if the building is mothballed?
Yes, that was one of the concerns that we as the Business Committee and indeed the General Council more widely have had over a little while, and we've discussed that with Neil Curtis, who's the chap in charge of the special collections in the university, and the answer is that they are being carefully stored in Marshall for the moment, without damage, but are being moved to off-site storage as part of the decant from the east end of Marshall College.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for the question, Peter. Anything else on page 2 of the minutes? Matters arising from page 3. Good. Now we come to the main business of the meeting, which is the principal, George Boyne, who's coming to address us on the state of the university at the moment. And welcome, George. We were very sorry that illness prevented you being with us in December at our last meeting, and it's great to see you here today.
Thank you, and I'm very pleased to be here to present a short set of slides about the position of the university at the moment. I'll cover Aberdeen 2040, research, education. I'll talk, of course, about the financial challenges that the whole higher education sector is facing and how we're dealing with those at Aberdeen. And then I'll set out some of the highlights from the last 12 months, because despite the financial challenges, our university community of staff and students continues to do fantastic work. And we have a lot to be proud of in a very challenging context. So first of all, I'll remind you about Aberdeen 2040, which we launched in February 2020 as our 20-year strategy. It's a set of commitments for the university to be, as you're able to see here, inclusive, interdisciplinary, international, and sustainable. And our whole university community spent a year developing what turned out to be an award-winning strategy, and we continue to work on this and be very committed to it. We've always seen the 4 components as being at their best when they're connected to each other in our education and research. It's our education and research which allows us to move towards meeting these commitments. And I just want to pick out one example of that type of work, which is the education and research undertaken on energy transition. And we've only recently had a major UKRI grant of almost £6 million for our energy transition work. So that work is inclusive because we're focusing not only on the technology, but also on a just transition, so that no one is left behind as we move from oil and gas to renewables. It's interdisciplinary because it draws upon academic disciplines across the university, and the humanities, the social sciences, in engineering, in geosciences and biological sciences. Everyone is contributing to the work on energy transition. It's international because we are connected to other universities across the world. including Calgary and Bergen, who are also working on this topic, but also it's international in its relevance and its impact. And then finally, of course, clearly, it makes a very strong contribution to sustainability. So we continue to work on Aberdeen 2040. We have 15 years left to meet the commitments that were set out in that strategy. Ross, if we move on to the next slide, and I'll just talk a little about our external research activity. And I'm delighted to say that our research awards and research income are moving strongly upwards, partly fueled by that work on, yes, I think that's the right expression, by that work on energy transition that I just mentioned and the other interdisciplinary challenges that we're working on. So in addition to bringing in extra grants, we're doing a better job of ensuring that the research pays for itself, and that's what the indirect cost contribution is about. Are we bringing in enough money for the research to be self-funding rather than needing to subsidise it from our education? And it's our education I'll come on to next. And here you'll see some of our rankings in the National Student Survey, which continue to be impressive year after year, thanks to our student and staff community's collaboration on the quality of the education we provide and also the support we provide to our students. And I'm also delighted that employability is moving. We've put a lot of focus on employability in the last 6 or 7 years, not only the quality of the education that our students receive, but how do they use it once they've left us to make the world a better place. So Ross, if we move on again, I'll now come to the financial challenges, which have received no end of publicity in the last year or so, probably the last 2 years, and essentially 2 very bad things have been happening to the higher education sector. The first is the decline in our Scottish Government funding, declining in real terms and some years in cash terms. If that funding had been maintained for our undergraduate students, the University of Aberdeen would have a surplus, not a deficit. If the funding in Scotland had been the same as the funding in England for undergraduate students there, then the university would have a surplus, not a deficit. But neither of these 2 things have happened. Scottish undergraduate funding is worth about £2,000 less than English universities receive for educating English undergraduates. So that partly explains the difficulty that we've been in. But despite that long-term decline and the value of undergraduate funding, for 5 years we were running surpluses and had major income growth. Our income grew by £50 million between 2017 and 2022. That was coming from international students, for the most part, from other sources as well, but mostly from the growth in international student numbers. But you'll be aware that the UK government, through its immigration policy, has restricted the number of international students able to come to the UK and has prevented international students, especially the postgraduates, from bringing their families with them for the year that they come to the UK to undertake postgraduate study. So in our case, we have lost around £15 million in international student revenue because of the measures that the UK government has brought in. And you may have seen only this week a new immigration white paper from the UK government that seeks to further suppress the number of international students coming to the UK by reducing the post-study work visa from 2 years to 18 months. So that makes the UK a bit less attractive to international students. I must say the UK government continues to use very warm words about welcoming international students, but what matters to our applicants is the actions, not the words, and whether the UK is actually a welcoming place. So we've had these 2 very significant hits on the sector and in our income in Aberdeen. So we need to adjust to this change of circumstance. The biggest risk to us, of course, is not change, but the failure to adapt successfully to change when it happens. So we're looking at our programme portfolio and our staffing to ensure these are appropriately aligned, but we're also increasing the diversification of our income. For the last 6 or 7 years, we've had important transnational education activity in Qatar, And China, if the students cannot get to us, we need to go to where the students are and offer University of Aberdeen degrees in country, on site, so that we're still able to offer degrees to international students. We're currently looking at 2 other transnational education opportunities. I can't say too much about that because they're commercially confidential. There's one in Europe and one in India. I think that's non-specific enough so that I'm not breaching any of the terms of the negotiations which are currently taking place. But this is certainly something that we'll see expand in future years because there is a tremendous appetite for a University of Aberdeen degree in other parts of the world. Now, I mentioned at the start that despite the financial challenges for the sector, we continue to do fantastic work here, and I'll give some indicators of that on the final slide. And here you'll see our UK rankings. We have our highest ever position in the Times and the Sunday Times of 15th in the UK and 2nd in Scotland. Similarly, in the Guardian, 12th again in the most recent ranking for the 2nd year running, also our highest ever ranking in the Guardian League table, and also for the 2nd year running, 1st in the UK for medicine in the Guardian League table. Fantastic work by everyone across the university, fantastic work by our colleagues in Forester Hill in producing this stunning achievement of being 1st in the UK. Recently, there was a Times higher ranking of interdisciplinarity, which you've seen in the Aberdeen 2040 strategy is absolutely core to what we're trying to achieve here. It's the first time this ranking has come out. I can't entirely validate the reliability and the accuracy of the ranking because it's the first time it's been used. But nevertheless, it's great that the University of Aberdeen is 2nd in the UK for interdisciplinarity. And then finally, we have this super contribution to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, top 50 in the world, top 10 in the UK. What I would say is, if this is what we're able to achieve in these financially straitened circumstances, imagine how much more we could do if higher education were funded properly and sustainably. Thanks for listening. I'm happy to take questions.
If those joining us remotely could put up their hands in the chat, that would be useful. Peter, your hand is still up. Thank you very much. Now, questions to George. Norman.
Yeah, George, thank you very much. I think we all probably fully understand the difficulties that the sector is facing. If 72% of all universities are losing money, then clearly there's a structural issue. I guess my concern is that and I'm no doubt every pressure has been put on the Scottish Government and UK Government to try and address this. And although people will say, yes, you're important, we don't seem to be a priority. Whereas if we were a steel plant in Sunderland, we might well get help. But what is the real worry for me is that unless there's a significant change in government policy and more money is available, which looks unlikely given the current tranche, what is the sort of medium-term plan? We can try and do our very best in the short term and raise revenue and so on. But is a restructuring of the whole sector not inevitable? And I wonder whether the danger is the sector has sort of death by 1,000 cuts, that we try our best, but then unfortunately they throw another curveball in and you'll end up even worse than you had projected. And really, I just wonder whether there are conversations, and maybe it's difficult for you to answer this, and I don't want to put you in a difficult position, but I just wonder whether the restructuring, the amalgamations, the mergers, a completely streamlined sector is not inevitable unless there's a major change in policy. I don't know.
That's such a good question, Norman. Thank you. I think some form of restructuring is inevitable unless the funding improves. You're right that every university is being left to its own devices to make the best of a very bad situation. You're in the business school, so you'll know about market failure. And I think this is what we have here. Universities have been left to compete with each other. And that competition is now having negative consequences for us and for other institutions in the sector. And the government at the moment is standing back and saying, except for Dundee, which is getting all the extra cash and nothing is coming here or indeed to any other Scottish university, and that's a concern for us that you will understand that we're talking to the Scottish Government and the SFC about. But governments are mostly standing back, the UK government and the Scottish Government, saying, sort it out for yourselves, guys, make adjustments, deal with it for yourselves. But that is not a sensible long-term solution. In any industry where the revenue has collapsed, and we're looking at a crash here for higher education. This is the equivalent for higher education of the 2008 crash. If you remember the images from Lehman Brothers of people walking out with their belongings in boxes, this is the kind of job losses we're seeing across the higher education sector. It's not getting the same attention as a steel plant because it's so dispersed. All the local media are picking this up, but somehow it doesn't seem to aggregate into the national story that it deserves to be. So if an industry crashes, usually by the end of that crash, there are fewer companies in the industry. The remaining companies become more specialized. The niches are narrower for supplying, in our case, education and research. And the whole thing is just smaller. And without government intervention, this is where we're going, just as an economic inevitability. So I think the UK and the Scottish Government have a responsibility to see higher education as a sector, as a system, as a connected national asset that needs support and intervention just as they would in some other industries, rather than leaving every individual university to sort it out for themselves. But I see no strong appetite in either the UK or the Scottish Government yet for that form of intervention and a recognition that our universities are connected to each other. Yeah, we don't want to see the University of Dundee fail. If that one fails, that's a gap in our higher education infrastructure. We'd like all the institutions to survive and flourish. But we're in a nakedly competitive context without support from government to collaborate. And that's what we need. Thank you. Great question. Yeah.
Good. Could we go next to an online participant, Christian Omoru? If you could switch on your microphone and ask your question, Christian, that'd be very kind. Thank you. Okay, also online is Jason Forbes. Jason?
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Yes.
Hi. Thank you for this very valuable information. What is happening in the United Kingdom has pretty much happened in Italy over the course of the years. And one way that the Italian higher education system has tried to address this matter was through stronger collaboration with the foreign institutions, with the aim of bringing foreign international students here for very specialized courses. I think the University of Aberdeen has done very well over the years with attracting international students in Scotland. And I think that the right way to go possibly would be to further strengthen this collaboration with other institutions. I know that the University of Aberdeen has already put a tremendous effort into exactly this, but I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there to consider. as I know it's a very tough time throughout the higher education system, and not only that, even in the humanitarian sector. Over.
Thanks very much, Jason. George.
Thank you. Very good points. You'll have seen that international is one of the 4 core elements of our Aberdeen 2040 strategy. I think the University of Aberdeen is international in its bones, has a strong desire to continue to be so, and I would like our governments to support us in that ambition. We already, of course, have international collaborations, transnational education, as well as research. In fact, on the research side, many of our highly cited papers are with international collaborators. So the international collaboration is crucial to us, and we'd like to do more of it. Anything you could do to persuade our governments to help us to move in that direction would be very welcome.
Also online is Anne Minto. Anne.
Good morning, Duncan. Good morning, George. I wondered if you could just clarify something that you said, George, about the decline in the Scottish Government funding. And that we know there's this huge delta between what the universities get from the government, and the deficit has been sort of largely made up from international students' fees. But I think if I heard you correctly,
and you've gone on to mute.
Sorry, I don't know how that happened. I didn't touch it. Gremlins in the system. Sorry, where did I get to that you heard?
You were saying that you'd really just begun. If you start again from the beginning, Anne.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I'll keep my hands completely off my desk. George, you acknowledge what you said about the decline in Scottish Government funding, and we know there's been this delta between what they give to each Scottish university and what it actually takes to teach a 3 or 4 year degree at any Scottish university, and that deficit has largely been made up from fees from international students. Hence, you alluded obviously to the decline in the international students and the effect that that's having. But you then went on to say, if I heard you correctly, that Scottish universities get £2,000 less per head than English universities. And I find that quite strange, because obviously English university students are paying a huge fee of, 9,000, 9,500 and going up. So I was a bit lost with the maths there. So could you enlighten me?
So you're right that the English university fee for an English-based student is £9,500. The average funding we get in Scotland for a Scottish undergraduate is around £7,500. So there's the 2,000 gap between England and Scotland. And if all our current Scottish undergraduates were funded at the same level as the English undergraduate fee, that would make a huge difference to our financial position. But as has already been alluded to today, there is little prospect that the Scottish Government will fill that gap anytime soon.
Yes, yeah. But it's because of the Scottish Government's, policy that it is never, in its words, going to charge Scottish students. The way you said it, it was like, the government has prejudiced Scottish universities, when in fact it's the fact that Scotland will not allow any students to be charged fees, which is it's a slightly different connotation.
Yes, that wasn't quite the connotation I was placing upon it, but I see that it could
fine.
be.
Yes, okay, yes.
I think it's right that we recognise that the Scottish Government itself is very short of funding, and what we try to do with the help of our political contacts is to bend some of that funding in the direction of higher education, without expecting that the quantum of the Scottish Government budget itself will rise significantly. It's worth
No.
noting as well that none of the political parties in Scotland support the introduction of fees. So there is an absolute consensus across the parties that higher education for Scottish undergraduates must be free at the point of use.
Correct. Thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. Now, I'm going to come back to Christian Moru, and then I could perhaps look around the floor for questions. Christian.
Yeah, thank you very much. Sorry, I could be heard now, right? Can you hear me?
Yes, that's fine.
Yes,
Thanks,
we can.
Christian.
Okay. Just a quick one. We've heard the problem that is actually affecting the school at the moment, just like most schools all over the world. But the only thing that is not very clear to me, which I want to ask, is what effort, knowing the attitude of government towards, or the disposition of government towards this problem, what is the effort of the school, or what are they, trying to do to make sure that the government also see to their plight? Because I didn't hear much of how these issues could be resolved or could be tackled. Thank you.
So I think you're asking about lobbying of government, Scottish government, UK government, which is incessant by the sector and sector organisations, including Universities UK, Universities Scotland, the Universities and Colleges Employers Association. There are weekly discussions with government about how much damage is being done to the sector. But I'm sorry to say that our governments have other priorities, and that reflects the political reality that they're dealing with, and it also reflects public opinion. And we have questions to ask ourselves on public opinion, because you may have seen at the general election last year a list of the things that mattered to the electorate, and universities were very, very low on that list. We came about 28th or 29th out of 30 issues that the public really cared about. So at that time, and that's before some of the more significant collapse in funding, we were just not registering as a sector with the electorate, and everyone has more work to do in explaining the difficulties that we face, in pointing out the job losses and the reduction in capacity to do good for the world, because that's what we're actually talking about here. Our education and research makes a difference to the world around us. As we get more underfunded, our capacity to do that work inevitably declines.
Thanks, Christian. May I add to your question something that, or an observation to your question that is more difficult for George to make than it is for me to make. Those of us that are electors that are voters in Scotland can make representations to our members of Parliament and members of the Scottish Parliament to take a different view of universities, particularly picking up the last point that George has made, that the university sector contributes so largely to the GDP of the country, to the international reputation of the country, and to the health and prosperity of us all. There's a strong case to be made. Now, so thanks very much, Christian, for that thought-provoking question. I'm conscious that there are a few people online want to ask questions, and don't worry, I'll come back to you. But in the room, Derek would like to ask a question.
Yes, thanks, Duncan. Thanks for your presentation, George. We're all on the same side here. We're all trying to help to get through these challenging times. The point earlier about the inevitability of some sort of restructuring is noted, and that would be so much better if it's planned and well thought out, rather than just crisis at the end of the day forcing forcing things to happen. In the meantime, though, if that isn't going to happen just at any time imminently, with the competition that continues between higher education organisations, the likelihood is that deficits may well continue to be incurred. And my question to you is simply, how resilient is the university's balance sheet to absorb any deficits at the sort of current levels? Is it strong, or are we already in danger?
So last year we had a deficit of 8.5 million. It's 6.5 million this year, so it's heading in a slightly better direction. If it were to continue year after year after year at 6.5 million, then in about 6 years' time, we would run out of cash. In other words, we would be like Dundee, which has needed a liquidity injection from the Scottish Government to pay the wages. So we're a long way off that. We're not standing on the edge of the cliff, but we can see the edge of the cliff, and we need to be walking backwards from it rather than walking towards it, and that's exactly what we're trying to achieve, and have a plan in place to gradually bring that deficit down and get back to break even, because it is eventually unsustainable to keep on running a deficit at that level. But we have time and space, and we have opportunities for revenue growth, including in the transnational education that I mentioned earlier, to get the spending and the revenue back into balance and to get back to break even. There is time, but it's not a huge amount of time. Does that answer your question on the cash side of it?
Yes, it does.
Thank you. So we must take action to address it.
Thanks very much. Alex Kemp.
My question concerns the need to increase revenues, and my particular question concerns the fundraising campaign, which was announced some months ago, and I did contact the office which deals with that. We have it all established a long time. I was around in 1995, and it was enormously successful, and brought in large and sometimes unexpected sums of money. But I'm not quite sure where that stands now. It hasn't been mentioned recently.
So we have quite a complex governance structure for fundraising in the university. There's the University Court, which has approved the content of the campaign. It also needs to be approved by the Development Trust, and negotiations are currently taking place between the university and the Development Trust about moving that forward. I hope it will move forward soon. The fact that we're not in campaign doesn't mean that we're not generating philanthropic support and income, because we continue to work at that. There's about 5 million coming across to the university this year from philanthropic sources. We expect that to be 6 million next year. So it's building slowly, but I think if we were in campaign, it would build more rapidly. So I'm as keen as you are to see this move forward and for it to become a proper public campaign to support our students, or education, or research, or innovation. All of these things are planks of the campaign. So we get, I must say, Aberdonians are under-recognised for their generosity. We do very well from our alumni community and from our donors in supporting the work that we undertake here. And each year there is a significant and unexpected gift from a source that we weren't expecting to be quite so generous at this time. And sometimes those are legacy donations, and clearly there's a lot of sadness associated with that, but it does help the university to thrive. Typically, the philanthropic investments are for specific purposes. Mm-hmm. So it's not like, nor would we want to just put this money into the general account, but it's fantastic that we get this extra support for education and research from our donor community. I think if we were in campaign, it could rise by 50% on an annual basis. We could go from 6 to 12 over a period of time, because that will take investment.
Yes, I did actually contact the Development Trust people when the campaign was announced, because I thought I could help them, and they said that they were approaching recent graduates. Okay, that's fine, recent alumni. But I pointed out to them that going back to the lessons from 1995, there was a distinction between getting relatively small contributions from recent graduates and potentially much bigger ones from corporate. So I instance my own case pretty well out of the blue. When we had the campaign, I was approached, and a contractor company in the North Sea agreed a contribution to pay my salary and national insurance overheads, pension overheads for 5 years. I had no particular contact with that company. So what happened? It was the alumni. So Ewan Baird was the name of the chief executive of Schlumberger. His father was our own Sir Dougal Baird. So that approaching more senior people can trigger corporate donations, which can be more substantial. Ewan Baird did not pay out of his own pocket. It was a corporate gift, and our development trust is there, and they, as I understand it, do have knowledge on how to deal with tax implications and so on. Can I just say one other thing, as long as I'm speaking?
Yes, on you go, Alec.
The principal talked about the problems we're having getting more and more foreign students. Did you know that in this immigration white paper, there's a proposal to put a 6% levy, a tax, on foreign fee income which we receive? Can you believe it?
Indeed, an extra tax on universities. Not only have we had to cope this year with the national insurance increases, which all charities have had to pay, which I just find extraordinary. GP surgeries paying extra national insurance. Charities across the board with higher national insurance payments. This is a difficult policy to rationalise and to accommodate in our daily activity. I'm glad you mentioned the Bairds, because they've been fantastic donors to the university over the years. And I met Ewan and his wife in New York last October. They continue to be generous towards the university. The next time I see them, I'll remind them about the support they once provided to you directly, and ask if they'd like to revisit that arrangement and start it up again. Thank you for telling me about it.
Alex, if you could switch off your mic again. But just to underline what Alec's been saying, my feeling is that there is among alumni of all ages and stages a thirst for paying back in time as well as money what the university has given to them. And I would encourage the university and the Development Trust to bring to a close the conversations about getting a move on with the fundraising campaign, which Claire Livingston, I think, presented to a General Council meeting a year ago. Now, are there other questions from the floor just now before I turn back to the people online who've been waiting patiently? Jenny Sheriffs.
The mistress of technology. A little bit of musing from one of the very lucky generation who went to university, had their fees paid, who got grants and everything else. I've been talking to a lot of younger people, and I mean, people that have been born this century, and it strikes me that an awful lot of people are not considering going to universities anymore because they have lifetime debt, or they see it as lifetime debt, and they want to get jobs immediately because they're finding it financially difficult. They're not able to get to buy houses, they're not able to start families and all sorts of things like that. Is that a current trend, or is it just a blip in the thing? And the other thing is, should Scottish universities reduce their degrees to 3-year courses instead of 4? There you
So I absolutely understand that it's financially difficult for this generation to afford university in a way that it wasn't difficult for us, because we were much better supported by the government, by the state at that time. But what we see in Aberdeen is increasing demand from Scottish undergraduates, or Scottish undergraduate intake has been going up for the last couple of years, is set to go up again this year. We're running the risk, because demand is so strong, and we're keen, of course, to take everyone who is capable of successfully completing a degree here, regardless of their background. We're running the risk that we'll get penalised by the Scottish Government for taking too many. So we're just at that, almost at that line where we start to get a financial penalty for taking extra Scottish applicants, which is an extraordinary state of affairs. But the Scottish Government has its budget. There's only so much it's able to put into higher education, and therefore it doesn't want us to exceed the limit that it's set. So there may be restrictions on the ability of 18, 19, 20-year-olds to go to university now in a way that wasn't present in our time, but it's not impeding demand for our programs in Aberdeen, which is a good thing. Sorry, Jenny, what was the second part of the question, the shorter part?
the fact that English universities have 3-year degree courses,
yeah.
We've got 4.
So I don't detect any appetite in the sector or on the part of the Scottish Government to limit the length of the degree in Scotland. It's slightly more expensive for the Scottish Government to run a 4-year degree than a 3-year degree, of course. But I think our applicants enjoy being here for 4 years. And although it would be possible in principle to move to 3, what we're finding with our international partners, with whom we're having discussions about transnational education, is that they see a 4-year degree as a badge of quality. So they prefer the 4-year degree to the 3-year degree. So we just need to be careful not to damage something that could help our internationalization, help our transnational education arrangements, and help our financial sustainability.
Thanks very much. Now, can I turn to the online participants, and in particular, Eric Wong, who's been waiting patiently for a very long time. Eric.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Principal, for that excellent summary. My question would be, acknowledging the fact that the relationship between university and government is increasingly strained, and in some country like where I'm living in the United States is downright hostile. We all have to look at different sector, different points to engage to achieve funding and support. My question with reference to, given the excellent reputation and achievement of Aberdeen University in the biomedical training in the medical school, what plan is in place or will be in terms of engaging industry, recognizing the fact that University of Aberdeen providing an excellent source of training for future generations of biomedical employable candidates. Would it be possible to increase that liaison, increase that lane, and thereby improving the future funding situation by being better connected with the industry of which the university serves excellently well?
Free connections We've been developing those in recent years. If anyone's been to our Forester Hill campus, you'll have seen the new BioHub building, which is for spin-outs, startups, opportunities to commercialize the fantastic expertise here. Currently, we have no similar facility in Old Aberdeen, and that's one of the elements of the fundraising campaign when it eventually gets going, is to have something like the BioHub for our expertise to be deployed in Old Aberdeen in a similar way to connections to business and industry. We've changed quite a few things in the university in the last 7 years in terms of industrial connections and incentives for academics to undertake this work. And that includes revising our costing and pricing policy so that there's a clear benefit to the people who are doing the work. And it is now much more easy to get promoted on the basis of innovation and industrial impact all the way up to full professor, and that wasn't present before. So there's a lot going on to do exactly to meet the points that you're talking about. Thank you.
Now, a second person waiting patiently online is, and I'm sorry about my pronunciation, Xiao Xiu.
Oh, that's a very good pronunciation, actually, Chris. Thank you very much indeed. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear you fine. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Vice Chancellor. I'm very interested in something that you said earlier, which is research paying it for itself. But there are certain subjects are actually a lot of in the humanities. Well, I mean, the research actually doesn't pay for itself. I mean, it's more about teaching. So I was wondering if there's a possibility for teaching in humanities actually find a way to be more self-sustainable. Is there any exploration efforts to do that currently on the way? Because I was thinking, for example, is there any capacity to expand summer school? Would that be viable at all?
Yes, is the short answer to that. Definitely. We already run some summer schools. I would like us to have more. We had a discussion on this point at our Senate meeting yesterday, so there's clearly an appetite to run more summer schools, and we're supporting our humanities colleagues to develop new programs which will attract larger numbers of students, which is the crucial action for their financial sustainability.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Now, also online is Chimaida Tabaras. Chimaida Tabaras, please.
Hello, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, fine, thank you.
Sorry, I just wanted to mention that I used to live in Edinburgh, no? So when I was living there, the university was completely involved in the cultural events of the Fringe. They did venues with the infrastructure. So I don't know if the University of Aberdeen could be also use the infrastructure, all the buildings, everything to organize cultural activities. I don't know, a music festival, a theater, performance, exhibition, or 1 week of theater, or a Biennale of Art. Something cultural that maybe, I mean, that the infrastructure can be used, or I don't know, folk tales during the night, 1 weekend of folk tales, or Celtic music weekend, or folk, I don't know. That's what was my suggestion. Sorry, I don't know if it can help, but thank you.
Thank you. That's also a very helpful point, where it would be good to have more cultural events on campus and for the campus to be more open. We have some of that activity already, for example, in the Wayward Literature Festival, or Elphinstone Institute runs numerous events, concerts, focusing partly on Doric and Scottish culture. More of it would get a better buzz for the campus, I feel. And again, that was listed in some of the actions that we looked at Senate yesterday, and I'm keen for it to develop. It will take some investment, of course, and these are always the difficult decisions about where do we put our limited resources for maximum benefit at this time. But I'm very pleased to hear that question, and would love to see more cultural activity on campus and around the city.
Now, I don't see anyone with their hand up, so that's an opportunity for me to ask a couple of questions. The university is rightly proud of the amazing performance in the UK league tables, punching far above our weight and up well into the Russell Group category. Internationally, the picture is gloomier. Despite the fact that Oxford and Cambridge, which are universities in England, which you may have heard of, have kept up their position in the QS University International University rankings, Aberdeen has gradually slipped while I've been convener of the business committee, but I don't think there's a connection in these two events. We were about 170 something, and we're now about 230 something. Still a creditable performance, but there's a Chinese member of the business committee made the point very forcefully a little while ago that to make the best job of attracting international students, a university should be in the top 200 where we were a handful of years ago. Now, league tables are gameable, and part of the difficulty that I refer to is that the underfunding of the university sector in the UK plays a part in our ability to make progress on the international rankings. But is there what scope is there? What advantage what efforts is the university taking to improve the position in the international rankings?
Really good question. On the international league tables, in terms of our UK ranking within those tables, that's holding pretty much constant.
Yeah.
So we're somewhere between. In the last 10 years, from memory, including before my time, we've been bouncing around 25, 27, 28 in both the QS and the Times Higher. So against other UK universities in the international league tables, we're almost just stable. We're not really slipping. The major difficulty is what's happening to the whole sector, the whole UK sector in the international league tables, because we're going down. I think the majority of UK universities' international rankings slipped last year and have been doing so for a number of years because we're underfunded. So what do we do about this? The international league tables are mostly based on research. 2/3 of the total ranking is research-based. The UK league tables, it's the other way around. It's mostly based on education, but the international league tables essentially are mostly research league tables. That's why the growth in research income is so important to us. Not just the quality and the impact of the research, but the publications that are produced from those grants should gradually turn this, but it is a long turn. If you think that we get the grant this year, we do the work over the next couple of years, we publish the papers over the couple of years after that, and then attention starts to get paid to those papers, we're looking at 5 or 10 years before the super growth in research income will feed through into our international rankings. But the bedrock of it is research income, research awards to underpin high quality work. We'll need to be very patient before we see the international rankings moving in response to the higher level of research income. So if you invite me back in about 10 years' time, we'll be able to test then whether the growth in research income really has produced the upward movement that we expect. But that is the only solution, is better research, better citations of the published work to move us up the international league tables, for as long as they continue to be focused primarily on research.
Okay, thank you very much, George. Can I ask a question on behalf of Ian MacDonald, who says, if I and other members of the electorate in Scotland were to approach our MSPs about the funding level disparity between Scottish funding and English funding, which you've described, George, given that an increase of £2,000 per student is highly unlikely, is there a break-even point where the tables could be made equal and might be more politically achievable?
So, as you rightly point out, English universities are better funded for the bulk of their undergraduate population, for their home English undergraduates. That's about £2,000 difference. The fee currently sits at £9,500. What English vice-chancellors tell me and what their CFOs tell me is that they too are losing money, even on the £9,500. So English universities are also running undergraduate education at a loss. So levelling it out would reduce the size of the loss, but it wouldn't wipe it out completely. That would take about 13,000 per student to actually generate even a small surplus on undergraduate education. So you're right, we can't ask, because the political consensus in Scotland is no fees. Seems we can't ask for fees. We can't even ask for those who are able to pay the fees to be allowed to pay the fees. All we're left with is continued lobbying of the Scottish Government to lift a little the level of public funding for our undergraduate students.
I think Ian's question is directed to how much is, quote, a little, unquote.
To get to a break-even position, it is a very, very significant increase. It's more than 9,500 to get to break-even.
But earlier on, you were, if I remember correctly, saying that that if the Scottish funding for Scottish students were the same as the English funding for English students, the university's deficit would be wiped out. I think that's what Ian's recollecting.
Sorry, I thought it was about break even on each undergraduate. You mean break even for the university as a whole? Sorry, I misconstrued the question. Yes, £2,000 extra per student would do it.
But you were saying £2,000 per student would more than do it, and I think Ian is trying to find a compromise area that would be politically acceptable, lower than 2,000.
I'm reluctant to name that figure because I would like to be properly funded rather than just have a marginal adjustment that leaves us inadequately funded.
Okay, a very good try, Ian. Thank you very much indeed. Now, Arthur, I've got one other question if nobody else has. I don't see any people catching my eye in the room, and nobody at the present has their hand up online. So my question is this. Understandably, the university is seeking to make savings from undergraduate and perhaps to a lesser extent postgraduate, but certainly undergraduate teaching. And there was a valiant effort made to find savings in modern languages, which, to my enormous surprise and sorrow, were studied by a vanishingly small number of undergraduates at Aberdeen, whereas when I was here in the good old days, French 1 was you had to count them in their thousands coming out of the lecture, because History 1 was immediately afterwards. So all these nice young ladies came out from French 1 while we were waiting for the lecture room to open. Now, that was not an easy process. The university gave it its best shot and came up with economies. Do you draw lessons from that about the prospect of finding teaching economies elsewhere in the schools, or is that a closed book?
Well, this is never an easy process. As I said earlier, the biggest risk is not change, but the failure to adjust to change, so we must adjust. What I've been saying to the university community and publicly for the last few weeks, for the last few months, is that the best solution to our financial difficulty is extra revenue. So the best solution for the small programs is to become larger programs that attract more students. But that will mean program redesign and the development of new degrees that are more attractive to larger number of students. That's the solution that works best for all of us, for the individual disciplines and for the university community.
Absolutely. But is that really achievable, granted that there are caps on the number of Scottish students that the university is allowed to attract, and practical limits to the number of non-Scottish students that the university is likely to attract?
So we have other forms of revenue, which some schools are pursuing very successfully, from online education, from transnational education, as I mentioned earlier, from commercialization of the academic expertise. All of these things together are capable of working because we've got a great track record to build on and great expertise to deploy to these various markets. So yes, it's achievable.
And it does also have the advantage of strengthening the university's performance in the student experience element of the rankings, which is extremely good. Perhaps all universities are good, but Aberdeen is particularly good in this area, the surveys show. I think we've probably exhausted questions, and we've probably exhausted George as well. It's been great to have you as principal over the last few years. You're retiring in December, which will probably be before the next General Council meeting. But I think that today and over the past few years, we owe you a debt of gratitude, which we can perhaps express in the normal way. Now we turn to my report, which is in your hands and is in my hands too, once I can find it. Does anyone have any questions on the report, either in the room or online? There's one thing that I would like to suggest, just to see how people feel about it. We've come to the end of a period of study of commercialization of research and graduate employability, as paragraph 4 reports. And there are other things, including a just transition in the oil and gas sector, which we've looked at in less depth. And I think it would be useful if, as convener of the business committee, I could pass on the findings of our work in these areas to court. One of the things that the General Council can do is to make representations to court on matters for the good well-being of the university, and I would like to think that I could write to Samantha, the clerk, and the secretary to the university with that thought in mind. Are people content with that proposition? Okay, thank you. Is anyone not content with that proposition, I should perhaps have said? And I don't see many people frowning at me in the room, and nobody has put their hands up online. I'll go ahead and do that. The other thing is in paragraph 5, whether people have other ideas beyond the bullet points for things that the special subjects that the Business Committee should be pursuing in the next little while. Okay, if anything occurs to anybody subsequently, they would be very welcome to drop an email to Ross, and we'll add that to the list for consideration at the June meeting of the Business Committee. Thanks very much. So is the meeting happy to note? Is anybody not happy for the meeting to note my report? Peter Zentler Monroe has a question. Peter.
Thank you. Is the university teaching artificial intelligence, or is it using it in its operations?
The artificial intelligence point is a very broad one, and I think if we decided to pursue that in the Business Committee, we would need to narrow it down a little. I couldn't quite hear whether you were proposing to narrow that down, Peter. Okay, but artificial intelligence is perhaps the theme of the moment. The university's done a lot, including up at Forester Hill, to harness the power of it. It's just my concern is whether around the Business Committee table we have anyone or enough people with sufficient expertise in that very broad field to take the subject on in its totality, whereas if we narrowed it down, there may be opportunities for us to address part of the artificial intelligence power and threat. Thanks very much. May we move on to the election of members of the Business Committee? The Business Committee year runs from the end of September to the end of September. We've got 10 vacancies and 14 people nominated to fill these vacancies. And in passing, I express my gratitude to the members of the General Council who have put themselves forward. It's great to see a number greater than 10, and it's great to see the diversity, geographic and in any other way, of the candidates that have put themselves forward. So whatever the outcome of the voting, I'm extremely grateful to those that have put themselves forward. Now, is it best for you, Ross, to explain what people should do?
Thank you, Duncan. I'll try my best. We'll do it in two parts. So people in the room who have received a ballot paper, you'll have had time to review that and understand the process that we're trying to follow today. If I could ask you to vote on the table on the overleaf on the form, maximum of 1 to 7, just list 1 to 7 in the table against your preferred candidates, with your name at the top of the table as well, please, so we can cross-check against those who are registered. Once you've completed your 7 choices and put your name on the form, if you could please drop your ballot into the ballot box at the front, that would be very helpful. Excuse me. Yes, full name, please. Not just first name. We need full name.
Excuse me, Ross, do you have additional forms, please?
Yes, we do. They're down at the front, Hugh. If you just come down, there's forms here.
Thank you.
And for those who are joining us online, I've posted a link to the voting form in the meeting chat. If you could please click that link, will take you that will take you through to the form, and if you could follow the instructions that are outlined there, and you'll see on the form there are 7 columns against the list of names. If you could list from 1 to 7, one dot in each column, please, and then the submit button is at the bottom. And you will also need to enter your name on the form, but you'll see that in section 1. If there's any questions, please shout or raise your hands. Thank you.
So should people who are in the room now be trooping forward and putting their ballot forms in the box? That's great. Now, does anyone have any questions?
Just while everyone's submitting their ballot papers or online votes, just to remind everybody that the counting of these ballots will take place early next week. We won't be in a position to announce a result today, but we will have voting and verification completed early next week, and results will be communicated to General Council members and nominees.
So you'll send us an email about that, will you, Ross?
I will be in touch with you, Duncan.
Okay, that's good. Any worries from people in the room?
Can I just check that people online are doing okay? I've seen there's been some responses in already online, but if anybody's struggling, please let us know.
Just type something into chat. There's no great hurry. We're not up against a limit of time. Okay. The responses are coming in online. I think we're at about a dozen responses so far. But the online responses don't suddenly come to an end, do they, Ross? The forum remains open.
The forum remains open, but if we could vote during the meeting, that would be appreciated. So I can see the number still going up, so I think people are on it, but please vote as soon as possible rather than later today. That would be appreciated.
Right. The next item on the agenda is the remit of the Business Committee, which, as I explain in the covering paper, the Business Committee itself has reviewed after half a dozen years, and really found that the existing remit was good. And we've suggested, as I mentioned in the paper, two main changes. There are changes in detail, but two main changes. One is to add a preamble explaining a bit more of the work, the position of the Business Committee and indeed the General Council. And secondly, adding the words in italics as a sort of explanatory note, a guidance, but not a limit, on how the Business Committee discharges its remit. So the Business Committee, which has had several goes at revising its remit in the last few months, is happy with the product that you see in front of you as Annex B, and I just want to check that the wider General Council is also happy. Is anybody not happy? Does anyone, or rather, does anyone have any comments to make? Somebody has. Yes. Eric, yes. Not Eric Wong, Eric Crockert. The pause is because Eric's microphone isn't working. A good question, and by way of background to new readers, I should explain that until 2017, the General Council, those assembled today and those many more who exist but aren't assembled today, had the right of election of 4 General Council assessors who sat on court. So court included 4 people who were elected to represent the views of the General Council, although of course they had to act corporately as part of court. And one of them is present today. And to our sorrow, annoyance, the governance changes which the university made in 2017 did away with these 4 members who provided a very useful link between the court and the General Council, and who were people of stature, sparing Jenny's blushes, were people of stature who would have contributed powerfully to the discussions of court as well. That was ended in 2017 and replaced by a system whereby court nominated 4 people who would be appointed by the Business Committee to be members of the Business Committee. So that these were 4 independent members of court who were also members of the Business Committee, and they would act as a link. And initially, the 4 former General Council assessors were fulfilled that role. And they were refreshed by new people after a year or so. These people have all retired from court. Their terms on court having expired, and there is now no member of the Business Committee who is also a member of court, and I bewail that because it makes more difficult the communication between these 2 of the three governing bodies of the university. Now, Samantha and I were discussing before the meeting how that might be rectified, but at the moment the answer to your question, Eric, is 0.
Sorry, I've now found the correct switch for my microphone. Was there not an undertaking given by the court at the time that this arrangement was made, that they would basically give us a number of names of people in court who would be willing to sit on the business committee to retain this link between the General Counsel and the court?
Yes, that's right. But the court has not recently come forward with any new names to replace those that, as I've explained, had terms of office on court which expired.
Can I ask, have they been asked why? Have they been asked why they have not done so?
I don't know the answer to that, but Samantha does.
Sorry, we have put the call out to the independent members on court who are alumni. So we're waiting for the individuals to come back to us. So I'll pick that up again. I know Julie Ashworth has put 2 calls out and raised it at meetings. So I'll come back to you with that one.
It has to be said that Julie Ashworth, who's the senior governor, has put such a call out in the past and has had no response, which is unsatisfactory, and which I take it upon myself to pursue.
I note, Duncan, that you were saying that the right of the General Counsel to make representations to the University Court should be used sparingly, but in the light of the information we've just given, perhaps this is something that we should be considering doing much more often.
You may be right. Thanks very much for that contribution, Eric. Very helpful. Any other points on the remit? Can I regard the revised remit, as having been approved? Okay, thank you. The next and indeed final item is the notice of the 323rd statutory meeting. We've gone back after a period following COVID where we experimented with a variety of different mixes of in-person and hybrid meetings and different times of the day and different points in the week. We've gone back to May and December rhythm of meetings for the 2 statutory meetings which are mandated, and so the next meeting would be due to be held in December. Now, by that time, I will have disappeared and only the smile will be left, and so I don't want to fix a meeting that is perhaps unsatisfactory to a successor, but it looks to me most likely that the meeting would be on the 6th of December, a Saturday, under the same arrangements as we have just now, a hybrid meeting involving people online and people in the King's Conference Centre. So you could pencil that in your diary, but we'll confirm, Ross will confirm once that is fixed. A few thank yous to the university staff who've come along and supported our meeting, especially Samantha and Ross, the secretariat, with whom I have an excellent relationship. It's nice to be working with them. To George in his retirement, but I've really done that already. To business committee members, particularly Jenny Mordew, who in the last few years has been the vice convener and with whom I've had a very helpful relationship. She has kept me on the straight and narrow. It's the business committee is an interesting organisation. It brings such a variety of people from different parts of the world with different expertises and, to an increasing extent, different ages and stages. We have in the meeting today 4 business committee conveners in consecutive order since 2010. So you've got 15 years worth of business committee conveners in the room just now, and standing on each other's shoulders, I think we've improved the working of the business committee. We've certainly improved its diversity, and I think we've probably improved its impact on the university. And I'll be sorry to leave, but my time, as is Jenny's time, is up. We've run to absolutely the limit of our appointments, and I will be sorry to leave. However, I don't propose to sit it out for a year when I'll be 76 and come back. There's a limit to how much old men should carry on, and one sees it illustrated across the pond just now. So thank you all very much for coming along today. It's nice to see people, some old faces who are very familiar, some people that I haven't met before, and wish I was staying to meet again. It's great to have the General Council an active body and suggesting topics for us to come up with. Now, I deduce from the fact that he's stood up and is stamping his feet that George wants to say something.
Duncan, we're not quite finished this meeting today yet. You've been very kindly thanking a number of people for their contribution and their service to the university, and that must, of course, include you. This is, as you've said, your final meeting as convener of the General Council. We're very grateful to you for everything you've done as a volunteer, supporting the university and devoting your time to helping to make this institution better. So we have a small gift for you to mark your super contribution to the university.
Well, I hope it's a small gift because I have to fit it in my rucksack to go home on the train.
Duncan, thank you very much. And again, let's have a round of applause.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, I wasn't expecting that. It's not in the script, but nonetheless, I'm grateful, and we had time to finish somewhat early. Thank you very much for attending.